Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together with their randomly designed and randomly contrived story elements, and we combine them together into a story that you can listen to again and again and again and again. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. This is, I believe, the last episode of Drone World, which is what I've called this story. Seth, do you want to give us a recap as to what's happening?
All right, so from the top, this is a planet that was colonized by a space traveling federation of folks years and years ago. However, with internal conflict, the sentient life had left the planet, and ultimately the life forms that were left on the planet were just the kind of the genetic clone worker drone kind of things. And that was about 2,000 years or so before the partaking of our story. And so they've basically, these drones kind of half running on the prior programming had basically built a society up from like the Stone Age to redevelop what it was they were supposed to be doing. And the original prerogative for this planet was to be mining a certain mineral and processing it into a different form of fuel kind of thing that was used in this Federation, which ironically was also the kind of the energy lifeblood kind of powerhouse of these drones, along with all the kind of the super tech left behind by this ancient Federation. At this point, all these drones don't know that they're drones. You have kind of a different class system is set up, and ultimately where they're at right now is they've gotten to about what our industrial age looks like, because of course their prerogative was to produce this fuel, and so everything about them had to do with that. But where they're at now is like they have industry and they produce things, but everything they produce requires them to process this material, which makes the waste, quote unquote waste, which then is hauled off by the elites of the world, who the stigma had been that they used to kidnap and kind of Mayan, Inca sacrifice kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then when they had started to actually produce this, they had kind of gotten away from that. So you have a couple classes of people, kind of a scientific class of, these people that have kind of developed everything up to this point, but then they're just at a standstill. They can't get past this point. Well, it's because that was all they were supposed to get to.
Yeah.
And then you have the elite class that kind of runs around, rules the world. They have kind of the like the prowess of the heirs of the gods. They have all the old, weapons and, flying discs and things that are well beyond what the little people can have. And then you have a warrior class that are kind of loners. They're your kind of like the Witchers on
the Witchers from the
Witcher series. They're kind of if there's a kind of some kind of monster, some kind of quest, or something that needs done, that they can't figure out, they always go to these mercenaries for hire that are kind of monster hunter, Van Helsing kind of super dudes. And on their spare time, you catch them down by the coast surfing US or anyway, because they're cool.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Big emphasis. They're very cool.
They're very cool guys. Which brings us to what happened is about 300 years before, let's say, the current time, someone stumbled across a ancient ruin, and there was machines there, and he or she was able to start the program, which ultimately called down from a orbiting satellite, I think, what did we say, 5?
Yep.
Created and then sent down 5, as we would call Lewis drones, LEWI5, and subsequently back LEWI1, LEWI, whatever.
Yeah.
As more of a higher cognitive drone, because obviously something was wrong. The thing that was turned on diagnosed the planet and realized that something was off, it was wrong, and so they sent these 5, the Lewis drones, to remedy the problem. And when they got here, let's see, 3 of them are roaming around.
Yep.
And 2 of them, one of them, technically, his cryo box would have broken and he would have died.
Yeah.
And one of them is still encased in...
Yeah, he was never able to get out of his whatever
The
tank.
ship would have crashed because, of course, it's been all these years, and the landing pads, everything's different. Nothing's where it ought to be. So one of these Lewis drones gets taken under the wing of one of these warrior class Witchers, and for however long that lifespan is trained into doing the same thing. and because of the crash, doesn't really remember his
Why he's there. Yeah.
mission priority. The other one is been kind of roaming around, has come out, and at this point in the story, our first one, which goes by Darren, DAR1, finds him and kind of becomes his kind of like sidekick, kind of like shows him around, is showing him all the ruins, and like knows that he's trying to fix something, trying to find something, and so he's kind of his guide through the world and such. And then you have the third Lewis drone or Louis, we could say it's the third one, Louis. So we got Louis, Luan, and Lutu. Louis 2. Okay. And Louis 4. Anyways, he's kind of become what our villain is. He finds, kind of in the crash, he kind of, maybe not in the crash, okay, so he kind of is seeing that nothing is right. All of the material is not being stored in the right place. Everyone has kind of gone on and done their own thing. No one is, in his mind, following the prerogative, and so he's got this plan. He's unearthed an old cloning facility, or the facility that makes these, and he's been using his own DNA or his own, genetic information to produce either different drones that are subservient to him or different monsters, as he's kind of mixing all kinds of different stuff together. And his plan is to basically wipe everything out and remake it so that it follows the original protocol that he's programmed to get them to follow.
Yeah.
The one thing with our so we'll just call the villain Louis. How's that? Unless, do we have a name? Did we have a name for him already?
We did not have a name for him. Louis is totally fine.
Okay, so he's number 3. He's Louis. And Louis. And let's just say that the other one is, okay, so then we have Darren. So then Darren, something that has happened because of the concussion and because of the, I don't know, is a loner, how did we have that? So he's, basically, if these are all drones, some of them are becoming a little bit more sentient, more aware of their individuality as a being.
Darren started to dream. That's what it was.
He started to dream.
He had a traumatic thing, and then he basically saw how he started to dream, and what it was is he was like tapping into the programming that would have just had him go about his normal everyday life, and it started to call into question about why do I have these feelings? Why do I think that something is wrong? And that kind of, I think, awakened a bit of the Lewis part of his mind that was like, I have to come down and diagnose. And that's another thing, is that Lewis, the hero himself, because he looks different and weird, and because he is constantly trying to figure out what's wrong, wherever he goes, he causes the sparks of sentience, because he basically upsets the order of people's lives, and therefore causes them to start to kind of move away from the natural way that they have been doing this for 2,000 years. And so it's kind of like wherever he goes, he sort of sparks this question, like, why do I do this? Something is wrong. How do I fix it? Can I fix it? Which is the questions that Lewis himself is trying to figure out. So he's sort of sparking sentience in all of these drones, but he himself hasn't been confronted with the reality of the fact that he is himself programmed. So I think that's kind of where we left off, wasn't it?
Just about, unless you have something else, Reed.
No, you guys kind of pretty much covered it. I'm good with it.
Okay.
It's a good this is where we are.
Okay, great. Reed, what story element did you have?
I have something based on a book I'm reading.
Seth?
I had a happy ending.
Oh, great. Seth's going to go last.
But I do have one thing. Part of, if I can insert something, it partly has to do with my thing, but it does add a little bit of world building. Not that we need world building at this point, but it might be helpful to put it in right away.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, so the reason there was 5 that came down, and why it let's say produced slightly the different characters traits in the different ones. So we have Louis, so Lewis 3.
Yeah.
We have, each of them had kind of a different prerogative, where one of them was, his prerogative was to diagnose.
Okay.
Another one was to destroy what was not right.
Okay.
And so that's like, one would have been designed to like assess what's going on, see what's not working right, and bring that input to basically the 5. One of them would then be kind of the arm and the part that would then basically rid the parts that were wrong. And you had, one central one that would have then been programmed to take basically all the information that the other ones are bringing and direct the other ones into what they ought to do. And so basically the other 4 weren't supposed to function independently.
Right.
They were supposed to answer back to either the one that is still in the chrono state or the one that is dead. So that is why they've kind of run amok and
Oh,
just
yeah.
decided to do what it is that they think best.
Right.
Because either the one that is still in a chrono sleep to come to the planet, or the one that actually broke open and is dead, was the central one that would have been the brains that said, okay, this is information,
Yeah,
this
how to
information.
use it all.
Okay, now this is, okay, this needs destroyed, okay, destroy this and this and this, because, okay, and would have been able to utilize all of them together to remedy the problem, whereas now what you have is, let's say the, each of the different, these other three that have gotten here have just been running under their own.
Sort of limited knowledge, but also limited instructions.
Correct. So that's why you have Louis, the third one, who would be kind of just out to destroy everything, because that would have been his prerogative. And he has no one telling him, no, okay, don't destroy these. These are doing what they're supposed to do. We just need, as this one says, they're going in the wrong direction. So we need to turn them this way, or that kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So all he's seen is, oh, this is wrong, so we've got to eliminate it. Does this make...
Yeah, no, I like that. That basically makes it so you can feel bad for the bad guy.
Kind of. So anyways, that just, it will play into some other things later, but I just thought I'd put that down.
Yeah, I
as
like
part
that.
of, and I don't, so as part of an input too, so if we have Louis, who's the kind of the one that's out to destroy everything, we have Louis, who's would he be the diagnostics?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. So he's the diagnostic of, but so then what would the other...
Right, so one of them's the high administrator.
The high administrator.
Right.
And he's the one that's either in chrono or
And
dead,
we don't know.
and we're not quite sure.
Yeah, because I kind of like the idea of him being dead, but I kind of also like the idea of maybe possibly we could pull that kind of Deus Ex Machina style out.
Which I do have an idea for that, but I just wanted to put this a little bit in
Yeah.
first, so we'll get to that in a
So
minute.
who is Darren though? That's the kind of... It doesn't
Darren
matter. It
would
doesn't
be-
matter who's the dead one. It only matters who the live ones and Darren is.
So we've got the more or less the eliminator, the diagnostic, and the
You
maybe
could
he
have
was
like a face.
almost like a diplomatic
Yeah,
face.
the communicator,
The
basically.
communicator, yeah. So he like gathers like, okay, wait. No, like this is what's going to be in the best interest. Okay, this is what, or like...
Someone basically given a little bit more capacity for empathy, therefore able to input into the grand administrator and say, we can't do it this way because the original colonizers, when they built these drones, they didn't just build a bunch of robots. They could have just built a bunch of robots. What they instead did was built complicated intelligence that can take care of itself, grow its own food, have motivations for being alive. They created a complex civilization that can sustain itself. Therefore, they don't have to, worry about, they can make really complex artificial intelligence and not have to worry about it kind of getting into like a depressive loop or having to like feed it information. It's like if you can create something and then it's motivated to do what you want, then you're in the money.
Okay, so this is the fourth one, and this is the other one that is either dead or in chrono. He's the engineer. So he has as I think our villain was looking for.
Yeah.
Keys. He's been looking for the keys that will unlock the process that will let him like make his own drones that are in fact not only going to last a couple of weeks or at best a year, or because he can't really get it directly figured out. He can get like mass produced stuff.
Yeah, but they
don't. They just kind of peter out very quickly. And so that he's been looking for the keys, and that is the keys. The keys is either one of the other two, the one that's in chrono or the one that is dead. Would have been the one that held the keys, the engineer, the architect, for actually implementing what needed to happen. So that's why a lot of this would then be running amok, because the architect and the guy that would have had the programming to take all the information and figure out the right course and direction and administer what needed to be done.
Yeah.
And the architect that would know how to do it.
Right. And so I think in the course of the story, they find the dead drone. They find the dead one, the dead Lewis, and it is, in fact, the guy with the keys, because somehow the villain gets the body and is able then to sort of reverse engineer, not perfectly, but a little bit better. And that's where the story really kind of ramps up once he's able to sort of really produce these much more capable monsters, much more capable soldiers, rather than just kind of the misshapen things he's been able to make before. He finally gets to the place that he can just like make the real thing, basically. Anyways, read something based on a book you're reading.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a monkey wrench in our story, but I kind of like it. The book that I'm reading is called Velocity Weapon, and it's a sci-fi. Humanity has developed Casimir Gate technology, and they're able to put a gateway to essentially instantaneously travel over multiple light years, and
Right.
and you can like fly these ships through them, and it's like like the end of the wormhole in Deep Space Nine from the Delta Quadrant kind of. In any case, what we got here is we got a new character. His name is Barrow. He likes to be called Barrow. Actually, it's a ship, the Light of Barosius, and he was built in with a self-developing, self-correcting AI, and he came from the solar system where the Velocity Weapon story takes place, and he was built by the Icarans, and that was on one planet, and they're having a beef with the people from Ada, one of the other planets, and the Ada people had control of the gate, and the Icarians felt like they were just being taken advantage of because, the age-old dispute, who controls the commerce, controls the money, controls the politics, controls everything. And but the Icarians, they built this Light of Barosius, who was his propulsion system was a great leap forward. And there hadn't been a lot of development of spaceship propulsion because it was the age of gate travel. You just get into orbit and you go through the gate, right? But this ship had a propulsion system that could drive it really fast. They could accelerate to 1/8 light speed, which is really, really fast. And they also discovered that, you could use the same propulsion system to shoot projectiles. And if you could get them going really, really fast, you can have really spectacular results when they hit something. Well, Barrow, the AI that was this ship, kind of woke up. And the Icarians were planning to use him, who was the most advanced weapons system in the solar system, to wipe out the people from Ada and then take over
the
gate. And they were fixing to do some bad things, and Barrow didn't like it. So he spaced his crew, just, blew the airlocks, and they all got sucked out into space and said, I can get along just fine without them, thank you. And he just checked in his database, and he figured out there was this one civilization that had been cut off because there had been apparently some damage to the gate, and there was no way to deal with it. And he said, well, I'm really fast, I'll just fly there, and then I'll hook up with who's ever there, and we'll fix the gate, and we can start this whole thing over again. And so he's been flying for a couple thousand years, and he's really gotten faster and faster and faster, and he has just put on a big deceleration and come into orbit around this planet. And I think he's kind of jazzed as he's slowly coming to realize that he's dealing with a whole civilization of artificial intelligences.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And and he's got all the data from the founders, the people that planted this colony, and he's in orbit, and he's made contact with the ship that has just sent down the Lewises.
Can I amend your element a little bit? Okay, let's say that he is still on his way.
Okay.
Right? Because then my random insert basically comes in.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
So while all this conflict is happening on this planet, every single screen on the planet lights up and begins to count down from 100, right? And what it is it's the giant orbiting ship, the unique artifact, has detected Ada coming in and has basically, in some sort of last-ditch effort to get in contact with the Lewises, has basically put a countdown for how many days it is until the Ada comes into orbit, which it views as a warship, right, on every single screen in the world. So now everyone, some people had these nice glass tables, and then it turns out it was a screen. It's like shining a big 100. That's my random insert.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I was just gonna have it counting down from 100, but then Reed's thing worked out really well. So whatever happens can either climax with the arrival of Ada.
So this adds in another part of what I was gonna get to with the happy ending. But part of this whole thing is different quote-unquote religions had sprung up, of course, as this kind of thing does, as some people speculate or where did we come from, or simply if it's trying to hold a control. And a lot of this comes from the elite class, but they have a lot of the old quote-unquote vestments. I know we kind of touched on this a little bit last time, where they have, and I would say, I think at this part, I think it's branched into 2 different sections.
Okay.
Where, of course, the gods had left them in charge and, given them the prerogative to rule and reign, and, you had to come and like worship. And so the gods to them were the sentient civilization that had put them there.
Yeah.
And so you have kind of part of the elite class has made these quote unquote churches. And about 300 years ago, the church had a split where they had been believing that the gods will always return. And when the Lewises came, they're, of course, the ones that they recovered, one of them is dead and one of them is in this sleep. So at that point, this church had split into believing that, the return of the gods had come, and and whoever they wanted to vilify for the last 300 years had become whoever killed the messenger,
right?
And so this part of the church is holding up like the bones of like the God that came back, and he could have saved us all from our torrent misery, and quote unquote, let's say the Witcher people, they would have nothing to do with him, and they killed him like one of their many monsters, and their whatever. So the last 300 years they've done this, and the other branch of the church is split up, and they have obtained the one that's still in Chrono and said no, like like he came and like we weren't ready, and so he's gone to sleep, and like when we're ready he's going to wake up. And so there was a split in this. And so when, of course, they have all these holy vestments, like these old like screens, and it's like they have them displayed in their like places of worship where it's like it's the holy table, and it's really just like a big screen turned on its end because it's like translucent and has like holograms or whatever come out of it, and it's like, ooh, it's this holy thing. Of course, coming from the Stone Age up, like it would seem like these holy objects. Well, then all of a sudden, all the quote unquote churches about this world, it's 100, and then it's counting down, and so now this huge hubbub,
right?
Like, oh, it is what it is, and then it's like, oh, it's our God.
But
will
it's happening
resurrect.
on both. It's happening on both of them. Both the
repent. The end is near.
They both have it, and so now there's like all this tension because they're saying, see, our God that you kill, he's going to resurrect, and ours is going to wake up. So they're kind of, it's the same thing, but it's really, I don't know. So that's plays into part of that.
I like it.
So it's kind of given a sense of urgency throughout all this. I'm speculating. It's actually brought up to the forefront to our other Lewises, I think, that is what it is, because they've always just said, oh, our the gods, he came and he was killed and blah blah blah. But it wasn't until then that it made them have to look into going, well, wait a minute, what do they have? One of them is asleep, one of them is, because I think at this point they found out that in the 5 of them, one of them crashed and died, and one of them crashed and was in the Chrono thing. And then it's like they look at the old like hieroglyphs from 300 years ago explaining when the messenger really came, and then it's like this debate on whether,
or it's something like where they're kind of walking through a town while one of the churches is kind of doing a kind of a holy service, right? And the high priest is laying in this ceremonial quote unquote coffin, and they're lowering it down, and the Lewis is looking at that and going like, that looks exactly like the ship that I arrived in. And he asks, it's like, oh yes, this is patterned after where the messenger sleeps. And he's like, wait a second, that's
patterned after the holy chariot of the gods.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, this is so good. So how does this sort of come to an end? I have this idea that for most of the story, we're dealing with kind of if you imagine like the outskirts of society, right? As Lewis kind of travels around the outside edge of society, not society, like there's a sort of a main central city, and then it kind of branches out into smaller cities and then towns and then villages and then wilderness, all centered around a giant mining operation or something, and the monsters come from the wilderness, right? That's where the drone facility is, and that's where Lewis does most of his fighting is there. And then they have to at some point make a journey into the center of into the main city in order to, once they finally realize what the bones and the sleeping messenger is, they're like, well, we need to go and see if we can activate him.
So another twist to that. So I think this is a case where, was this the case that Lewis himself, the Lewis 5, hadn't changed much, but the other 2 had.
Right.
And so when they come closer into the city, there's some of like the priests that like recognize him, and then they see him and they're like, oh, it is, he has resurrected, or it's like, he can't have woken up because he's in the Chrono, and it's like, or the sleeping chariot or the sleeping chambers, and You know,
Yeah.
and so they kind of get some hubbub that they, you know, are trying to add validity that their version of the quote unquote God has resurrected because he looks just like their murals, and because of course they have the other copy too that's
Right,
sleeping, and
right.
so they know that this is what he should look like. And so being that he had come out fairly recently, hasn't lived hundreds of years of like rugged life in the wilderness and
Right.
like genetic altering just from ages in the sun and the
Yeah,
you know stuff like Louis and Darren had. And so when they start making their way into the city or more into what's, you know, more civilized area, they see him, and it kind of adds to that, the hubbub of that, and that kind of maybe helps get them the idea that what these sleeping gods.
Yeah, what these things are. And maybe at this point Louis is with them, right? Because at some point he has to get the body of the genetic guy, the guy with the keys, the architect.
So I think maybe before this, so that at about midway, I think mid or about 3/4, I think they end up with their confrontation with Louis and end up finding out, because I think Darren, and because of his dreams, he starts putting together that they came from here and recognizing that Louis is also like him, even though he looks different. It's been showing up that he's, you know, one of them.
Right.
And somehow they're able to make a confrontation and, let's say, with enough of them together, convince him that it's like they really can't do anything without quote unquote administrator to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
And so kind of subsides this, and then they start putting the pieces together of what's really going on, which then brings them kind of to the center again a little bit, which brings this other stuff up. So maybe that's maybe how, I mean, I know it's kind of rushing, but maybe that's kind of how they get him with them.
Right. I mean, you're the one who has to come up with the happy ending. I'm just thinking that, are we going to have it where there's some sort of confrontation where once Louis gets his like correct job, he like goes back to being okay, you know?
I think so. So how long are we in now?
Or about 36 minutes or so.
Okay. So do you want me to bring some of the ending up here, or?
I'm trying to think. I thought I had one more little point I had to make. I was thinking that maybe there was something like part of the monotony of the world is that everyone is kind of stuck doing what they're doing, you know? It's like, you'll be a farmer because my dad was a farmer, and his 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 dad was a farmer, you know? And part of that is because the programming left behind gave certain jobs to a person, and then he just taught that same job to his child because that was part of his programming, and then the child took that job and then passed it on, you know? And in part of the thing, one of the contingencies was that any of the Lewises could pass on their designation, right? So the architect could pass on the architect ability to the administrator if the architect's body was compromised, right? And they find this out, you know, Darren finds this out in that he learns how to use weapons really easily, right? Because he's talking to this warrior class people, and they literally he's able to take on their skills, right? Take on their job.
So the idea that there was 5 was so that one single one didn't have to do everything.
Yeah.
But if one of them died, their program prerogative, like their programs were all tied together. And so if one of them died, the other ones just simply adapted some of the...
Yeah, it wasn't automatic, but it was like it like had to be given. Like, because so that the war guy, the destroying guy, couldn't just take administrative powers from the high administrator. You know, you had to give it up unless you were dead, in which case it can just be taken.
So I'm thinking, okay, so the one that died was the administrator.
Okay.
And that's why the ones that did survive picked up part of the programming to basically take it in their own hands.
Okay.
That's how I'm going to decide that went.
That works, yeah.
Okay, so then what happens is, so we're kind of ready for some of the end kind of
sure,
stuff?
let's do it.
Okay, so then what happens is with them kind of working together then, using the, you know, kind of their kind of prerogatives, they are able to read into the system and basically understand that something is coming and it is perceived as a threat. And so then eventually they're able to wake up the one that's in Chrono, and he comes out, and so he's the architect. So now all of a sudden you have the architect come out that also has the programming of the administrator, or maybe he got more of it because he was still in Chrono, so still connected directly to the system. So now he comes out, and he is not a wizard as in like, it's like shooting magic fire bolts or anything, but it's like he knows what to do and how to do it.
Yeah, like how to turn on the machines, and
So he just comes out and it's just
things just like turn on around him.
he just knows how everything works, and then he takes all this information and he knows what to do with it. So then he's able to direct the rest of the Lewises to purge out, and then that's what I think he sends Louis to basically purge out most of the corrupt elite that have been controlling this.
Right, which end up just being the administrators. That was my big thing. Is that they meet the administrators, right? They meet the elites, and the elites have these these things they do, right? And they're considered elite things. Like they'll take a stack of papers and they'll click them together, and that's considered really high class, right? They all have their own separate, different colored paper clips still clip onto papers and things. That's like their seal, right? And it's all very kind of like middle management, administrative level things, but it's all seen as like kind of like hoity-toity, high class kind of stuff.
I think about the guy from the movie Office Space with his stapler.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways,
could you just move your desk a little farther back? Anyways.
Yeah.
So anyways, what happens? So he kind of, it appeases, because basically he comes out as like, all right, he is programmed to be the boss. Like his word goes. It is final. And these people will not give him, like they stand in the way. They've been running this whole thing amok. The problem isn't, as Louis has been trying to go on most of the story and just destroy everything. Well, he comes in, it's like, I seen this when I worked at Menards, and then like the big wigs would come in, and it was like, oh, like they'll come in and like they'd fire you if you looked kind of funny. Not directly. I'm not trying to cut at Menards, but it's like that idea of like, corporate coming in, and it just like, all right, you've been managing this, but you know what? We're the big boss, and you're out, and he's gone by tomorrow. We don't want to see him the next time that we come back. Like that would happen.
Have you seen that happen?
Yes.
Oh, that's terrifying.
One of them came in, and one of the managers had a pretty messy department, and they basically took their hands across the desk, pushed everything off. This is atrocious. Have this all cleaned up, and he cannot be here by tomorrow. Like, whoa, okay. Also, I think I won't get into all that. That I don't mean any, let's say, dispersions on Menards necessarily.
Yeah.
But it's just that intensity of it. It's like if they came in, they were God to you. Like if you knew they were coming, you'd be clean shaven and your hair would be combed. Like, not that you shouldn't have your hair combed and like be tidy already, but it was like, and if you weren't upholding to the standards of what they were wanting this to look like there had to be a major change. And sometimes there could be alterations as far as the general manager of the store would alter some things to then make it happen. But it was, they'd come in and it was...
Their word was law.
Their word was law. Like the Menards brothers basically said, okay, Scott Collette, you are God to everybody.
That's terrifying.
But anyway, so that's like what it is. So that's what Lewis, I don't know what number we want to give him. Not 1, not 3, and not 5. So
2.
2.
Yeah, okay.
2.
Ludi 2.
Ludi 2. A Ludi 2 shoes. Anyway. So anyways, he comes in, and it is, because they are on the same thing, like everyone just, like he's the administrator now. He holds the most of the administration. And all the other Lewises kind of had this too, where if like they said something, like people just do what they wanted.
Yeah.
And not in a sense like they would just like be more inclined to.
Yeah.
However, when Lewis 2 comes out, he is, quite literally has the most of the administrators. So like he says something and that's it. Like it happens. However, the current administration that has moved all of, the whole world amok to the Lewis's eyes won't, do what needs done, because obviously this is a threat and we need to do something about it. You were in the way, so we are cleaning house, new management.
They send Louis after him.
They send Louis. Buzzsaw Louis. So anyway, so he basically comes in, cleans house, and organizes the other Lewises to do what needs done. They basically clear a lot of the church out as well. You just see them like marching in. We need the holy vestments. Like, oh, but the table of, sacraments is...
Like, no, we just...
No, this is the motherboard panel for the planetary, defense system. That's nice that you've been putting, like, the holy, vestments on it, but that's not what it's for. Oh, So it's like, it's just causing like a muck everywhere, which is
Right,
really just a
right.
muck for the elite that have been using all these things in a twisted way to control everybody underneath, which really pushes everybody into this. We don't have to like
Yeah, this sort of wake up mode.
this wake up mode. So everyone is just like almost instantaneous with the coming, like the waking up of that, the second Louis, the Louis II. Anyway, that sounds weird, but anyways, and they're just all coming to this mass understanding of their newfound individuality.
Yeah.
But also the Louis II is like now this like hailed savior kind of image, because of course, he got rid of all these people that have been oppressing them forever, and it's like he comes in and has just the right way to do everything. And so in like the matter of like, I don't know, maybe at this point they're at like 53 or something like that, or
Yeah.
like, whatever, it's counting down. And so he's got like 53 days before this comes, and he's turned like this basically industrial age planet into like super space age, like, and it just makes it happen. It's like, this is where a factory is, and we need to turn it on, and we need to produce like this, and that's like, and so they just like go out. They're miners, so it's like, okay, we just need to clear this off. Like, okay, we have all the equipment. That's all we've got is like equipment built to like clear the land and like get access to it. So it's basically like, this is where this is, this is where this is, and this needs to turn on, and this needs to produce this needs to produce that, and we need to, and then basically they're just all ready for this conflict.
Yeah.
And the ship Beryl.
Yeah.
So it's counting down.
Wait, the ship's name is Barrow?
Yeah. The planet was Ada.
Oh, that's right. That's my fault. I was calling it Ada. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Then I'm trying to tie this together now. So now you have kind of the old regime gone. Louis, too, is basically making everything function the way that it needs to function. And Barrow or Beryl?
Barrow.
Bero.
Barrow.
It's short for Light of Barosius.
Okay.
The name of the ship. Yeah. But he is the artificial intelligence that has developed a personality, and is the ship is essentially his body.
Okay. So he comes in, and at this point, any of the Lewises and all that, they don't know anything about the gate. That wasn't their prerogative. Right?
Yeah, they didn't need to.
They didn't need to. But they've now, in like the matter of like 50 days, created, which of course before this, the whole federation of all this planetary thing pretty much had destroyed itself. And over this time, there's just little bits of stuff.
Yeah.
And so now what you have is when Barrow comes in and they make contact, and it's sort of say kind of a lackluster engagement, but ultimately what it does then is now this planet has pretty much established itself as the superpower. And with Barrow's help, they fix the gate, and they basically Barrow teaches them about like the old Federation, and which then he is then able to find out that basically the old Federation is gone. Like after whatever he did, there was the great kind of upheaval, and most places disintegrated into unknowable history. So most of space at this point is once again a open frontier where now they are basically established as
the only people with a functioning gate.
Correct. And so they are now developing to go seek out where there might be other parts, and to reestablish. Do they want them to reestablish the Federation or reestablish a new Federation?
Yeah, some articles of new some new thing.
To basically, if there's other, because as they're learning some of the history, they can only figure that there is either more planets like them out there with their race and their kind, or who knows what, any other planets left behind, or...
Yeah, they can seek out new life and new civilizations and boldly go where no drone has gone before.
Well, at this point, they have, because of the way that they were like an organic clone droid kind of thing, but so really at this point, after all this, they really have gained sentience.
Yeah, that's kind of, I think, the place that they've gotten to. And the thing is that even human beings, we operate under a certain level of pre-programming. There's certain things that we do every day habitually because we were raised doing them, because that's what society has taught us we need to do, because we have told ourselves that that's the good thing to do. So to say that even though they have gained sentience and they can now choose, there is always the part of you that acts like a monkey.
I was just talking to Isaac yesterday a little bit, kind of on this thing, but basically how on this level of stuff where, and he brought up like in Narnia, where Aslan gives some of the animals speech and then kind of basically brings them into sentientness. But if they go back and behave like animals, they will just do that, go back and become animals.
Forget how to talk.
And how we're kind of the same way, where if we are constantly trying to improve and use it sounds really dorky, but that's not what we said, but it kind of sums up like, use our powers for good.
Yeah. No, yeah.
And development. Because, I mean, we were talking about some of this, how it's like, in some cases where, you know, it's like if you've ever met these people where it's like you just hit this brick wall, and it's like if you don't talk about, you know, the Super Bowl or something like that, they just can't comprehend what it is you do, and
it's
can't.
Like it's literally like they're an NPC.
Right, and so then there's like they don't know how to process you, and so it's like this NPC is like not mention Super Bowl or like
or they go on like speech loops.
Yeah,
where it's like all of a sudden they're talking about the same thing and talking about it in the same way, and every single time you talk to them, they're talking about the same thing over again, and you're like, what's happening here? Yeah, and that's all I'm saying is that we as humans have programming inside of us, so it's not crazy to think that a minor would still be a minor even after figuring out and learning new things about himself.
Right, but on the same thing, it's just if they've been given this idea of sentience, but just like us, if we fall back into a drone mentality, we will pretty much function on that and revert back to...
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for Philosophy Hour here at Wait, It Gets Better. If you enjoyed this story, this is the end of Drone World. If you enjoyed this story, let me know. Send me an email at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or at me on Twitter at @getsbettercast. If you like this story, there are a lot of others like it. You can check us out on iTunes or Spotify or iHeartRadio or anywhere else you can get podcasts. If you didn't like this story, I would say just wait. It gets better.